Okay, so here we have the phone riddle. It says Ben was hanging out with his sister Sarah and brother Brad when he had to answer the door for a pizza delivery. When he came back into the room, he discovered that his phone was missing. Sarah and Brad admitted that they had taken it and put it in one of their rooms, but wouldn't tell him in which room the phone was hidden. They instead gave him the following clues. Sarah said, Brad is telling the truth, and the phone is in my room. Brad said, Sarah is lying, and the phone is in her room. Ben has no idea if either of them are telling the truth, but he knows that the phone is definitely in one of their rooms. If he guesses incorrectly, then his other sister, Taylor, gets to hit him in the head with a giant water jug. Using the clues above, can you correctly determine in which room Ben's phone is hidden? So I think what makes this riddle difficult is that you don't know whether Sarah and Brad are lying or telling the truth. And there's no conditions like one of them has to be lying and the other one has to be telling the truth. Or this person always lies and this person always tells the truth, like you have in some of these types of riddles. So we don't know. So it often helps whether we're looking at these kind of for fun riddles or math problems too. It helps to look at what are all of the possibilities, what are all the possible cases that can happen. So with this riddle, we really have four different cases. So case one, or when we say cases, four possibilities. Both are telling the truth. Case two would be that Sarah's telling the truth, and these are in no particular order. Sarah telling the truth and Brad lying. Case three, we can say that Sarah is lying and Brad is telling the truth. And case four would be that they're both lying. So that's all the possibilities for Sarah and Brad. So let's first take a look at Sarah. She says that Brad is telling the truth and the phone is in her room. So both of these statements, Sarah's and Brad's, there are two parts to their statements, to what they're saying. And these are what we call compound statements. So for a compound statement to be true, that means both parts of their statements have to be true. So for Sarah to be telling the truth, then Brad would have to be telling the truth and the phone would have to be in her room. Both of those things would have to be true in order for Sarah to be telling the truth. Okay, so let's see what that would mean if that would happen. Okay, so if Sarah's telling the truth, then Brad's telling the truth, and the phone is in her room. Well, if Brad is telling the truth, well, then Brad says Sarah's lying. So for Brad to be telling the truth, Sarah would have to be lying, right? Well, Sarah can't be telling the truth and lying at the same time. So what that tells us is that there's no way that Sarah could be telling the truth. Because if Sarah's telling the truth, then Brad's telling the truth. And if Brad's telling the truth, well, then Sarah would have to be lying. Those two things contradict each other. So that means Sarah has to be lying. So Sarah must be lying for it to make logical sense. That means both case one and case two are out. They're not possible. So now we just have to determine whether Brad's telling the truth or not. So again, for a person to be telling the truth, for a compound statement to be true, both of the parts of his sentence, both of the parts of the statement have to be true. So if Brad is telling the truth, then it would mean Sarah would be lying and the phone is in her room. Okay, well, we already said Sarah's lying, so that part checks out. And the phone is in her room. Well, if Sarah is lying and the phone is in her room, first we said Brad is telling the truth. So if Brad was telling the truth, maybe it would help to write these things down. So, Brad, we want to know whether he's telling the truth or lying. So for Brad to be telling the truth, then the phone would be in Sarah's room. Well, if Brad is telling the truth and the phone is in Sarah's room, that would mean Sarah's telling the truth. Again, Sarah can't be telling the truth and lying at the same time. So there's no way for Brad to be telling the truth. Again, I'll repeat that. So if Brad was telling the truth, then the phone would be in her room and Sarah would be lying. Okay. But Sarah says Brad is telling the truth and the phone is in her room. So if Brad was telling the truth, then that would make Sarah telling the truth. And we know that that's not possible. Sarah has to be lying. Okay. So we know that they're both lying. So this is what has to be true. Case 4. We just determined there's no way for Brad to be telling the truth either. So they both have to be lying. Okay, so for them both to be lying, then at least one part of each of their statements have to be true. Have to be false. For them to be lying, for a compound statement to be false, then at least one part of that statement has to be false. So Sarah says Brad is telling the truth. Well, we already said that that's untrue, right? So she's made a liar just because that's not true. So Brad's not telling the truth. Okay, so we have that Sarah's a liar. Now we have to make Brad a liar too. So for Brad to be lying, then one of the parts of his statement has to be false. Well, we already know that this part's true. Sarah is lying. So that has to be true. So that means this part of his statement has to be false. The phone is in her room has to be false. So that means the phone must be in Brad's room for the riddle to make logical sense. I know that was kind of a long explanation for this riddle. Some of you probably got it a lot quicker than that, but hope this makes sense. Let me know if you guys have any questions through email or commenting on Google Classroom.